Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Dirk Wood, CEO and co-founder at Parallaxis and Idea Harbor. Today, we have with us John Kennedy, who is the CEO and co-founder of Actual AI, which their logo is now the cursor for engineering managers. So we're going to start off here, do about 10 or 15 minutes, and talk about Actual AI and what they do. Just to kind of get us started, obviously, we're talking about AI. AI is a huge thing in the world right now. To start us off, John, what advice would you give leaders who are thinking about implementing AI in their organization, just as a start?
Yeah. We talk to CTOs and VPs of engineering every day. And right now, there's something really interesting going on, which is there's a bifurcation of organizations, the organizations who are going strongly towards AI and the organizations who are still skeptical. And we see a very different pattern happening in those two organizations, or those two different types of organizations. So the people who are getting there and who are seeing the kind of productivity increases, the 200% in some cases, kind of increase in velocity and releasing features faster, but still building sustainable code bases, it's because they've put in time. So, a lot of the times we see large organizations boot up a team of 4 to 6 developers and give them, 4 to 6 weeks to actually start prototyping and building. And that can mean coming up with a new process to build greenfield code bases, for a new project. Now, best practice that we've seen with AI is you come up with a series of prompts that actually get you to documentation that you put in the code base that helps the agent or the IDE build with you. And that could look like you start out by having a conversation with ChatGPT, and then you have a prompt that actually turns that into business requirements, and then another prompt that turns that into product requirements like a PRD, and then another prompt that takes that into a high-level task list, and then another prompt that takes that into a one story point task list. And that's actually what you can put in the code base that will guide the kind of the agent or cursor or windsurf to actually build. And that process, that set of prompts is a part of the process that we see large organizations building so that they can boot up projects and microservices really quickly. And then, another prompt within the process of building for kind of each new project where the agent within Cursor can iteratively take each task off the shelf and build it and write a summary of what they've built, and then tick that off and keep going. That whole greenfield process is something that we're seeing organizations spend time on independently. But once they do that, they get huge acceleration for new projects and for microservices and these kinds of things they're building and maintaining. And they're creating high quality software that's maintainable. And as long as they can add their own rules in, they can build to their own standards as well. And that's really the other side of the equation, is when they go after these existing code bases, understanding the design decisions that they've made there so that they can boot up a rules repository so that the agent or IDE can understand how to build in their own, with their own standards. So, the pattern on that side, for large organizations, they have to come up with a way to analyze their code bases to actually extract the design decisions and standards that they're using in the format that can be put back in the code base to once again be read by the agent, and then they can get great results. Then they're actually upgrading their code bases and making them more maintainable and fixing technical debt really quickly because what you've done for the agent then is described exactly how everything should be done. And the really typical problem with agents and IDEs with agents today is that every time you ask it a question, it makes different decisions. So you ask it to build one component and it uses one type of routing, and then another component, a different type of authentication approach, because it decides on the fly on all the design decisions. But if you give it that context, then it can actually build really sustainable, high quality software. So those two processes are something that organizations need to boot up today on their own, because they're not really set in stone yet. The standards for rules, for instance, in code bases are evolving very quickly. Cursor just brought out a new proprietary format. Our strong opinion is there should be an open source format, because we know that there are going to be tons of agents and software all working in the same code bases, and they basically need to know the same things. But right now we're seeing this proliferation of proprietary formats of rules in code bases. So that's something that organizations have to plan for. They have to budget. They have to get a team together, to prototype. And if they do that, then they can see the benefit and then measure that. That's where we come in, and then roll it out to the rest of the organization.
Cool. Very interesting. Thanks for that. So I got a couple more questions. I'm going to roll two questions I have into one because I think actual AI, from what I've seen, is going to be huge. I mean, it's something that I think has been needed for forever. Last time we talked, I was saying when I was an engineering manager, if we could have used, if I could have had what that tool was back then, it would have been to be powerful now, even more powerful back then. So the question is, just for the audience is, what actually does actual AI do? Maybe who's your ideal user, customer, something like that. And then maybe speak a little bit about what inspired you to actually go down this road and develop actual AI.
Yeah. Well, I can talk about what inspired us first, if you like.
Sure.
This is the tool that I've wanted, for the last 20 years building software myself, which is, giving yourself a crystal clear view of what's being built throughout the whole team in real time, which is amazing. And it's only possible now that we have LLMs that can actually go and review code and understand what's going on, and then actually do that hard context switch that a human would have to do to put that in higher level language and kind of business value language. So there's a range of tasks that we facilitate for developers, or for engineering managers. But how this was inspired was, can you give the AI superpowers to the manager that we're giving to the software developer? Because if you want to 10x your software engineering teams, you also need to 10x your software engineering managers. To be able to cope with all of that output, that avalanche of code. You need that superpower of alignment, of being able to make sure the output is all going towards business value. And if you're seeing all of that output from all your developers, how do you manage that? And a lot of teams were having to boot up, or a lot of organizations were having to boot up little teams. So like one front end, one back end, one integrations with a manager, because there's so much output that you can gain. And so, quite opposite to the trend that we were seeing, which is organizations flattening out, they're actually getting even taller because you had to have more managers per developer to kind of manage this output. So the idea was, if you can give AI superpowers to the engineering manager, then you can keep the more similar organizational shape and get that 10x acceleration. And so, the ideal customer for us is the one who's really serious about getting to AI native development. And they are, putting investment in, and they want to get to that place where they can fully leverage what's out there and best practice today. And usually for us, that means teams of over 50 developers, where little teams, they can try things out. But if you're putting a big investment into going to AI, you want to be able to measure it. You need to be able to understand what's going on, and alignment becomes a really big issue. Making sure you're building the right thing, making sure you're not breaking the code base. So that's where we come in, is software teams of over 50 developers, who need to understand the impact of AI and build faster and lower the management burden as well. That is actually increasing with AI. So, that's what we've built. We built a system that reviews all code changes. It automates progress reporting, and actually measures velocity across the entire organization, all the way down to the individual developer and AI agent.
Excellent. Awesome. So I have not personally done a competitive landscape analysis on actual AI. I'm sure you have. But if I was buying your product, I would say, well, why you? I mean, why actual AI? And there's got to
Yeah.
be, and I'm sure there are competitors, and that validates the market, which is actually great. But what would you say to someone who said, well, why you? Why should I give my hard-earned, greenbacks to you?
Yeah. So I would say that we're broadly in the segment of engineering management tools. But I would say there's definitely an engineering management 1.0, and then an AI native engineering management set of companies. So in 1.0, all those companies were focusing on drawer metrics, and you probably know them already. There's companies like Jellyfish and Linear B and Git Prime that were sold actually. Those companies that really focused in on the metrics that told you whether the company was operating agile effectively, whether they had the processes to operate agile. So things like mean time to resolution on issues lets you know whether your organization has the processes to deal with issues quickly. And so this is the kind of report that the VP of engineering or CTO might want to give to the leadership team, once a month. And the problem there is that a lot of engineering leaders wanted to build high-performing teams, and bought these tools to do them, but then they didn't get the granularity that they needed to actually understand productivity across the organization, or really understand what was going on. It was very much focused on those metrics. And developers were allergic to them. They felt like they were arbitrary metrics, and in a lot of cases, they were being judged on things like lines of code or number of commits. Even story points is not a really good way to understand developer output. And so that's why they really in many cases didn't have the stickiness. What we're seeing in 2.0, and we were ahead of the pack. We launched our private beta in July last year. There's been a few different companies have launched this year earlier. One from YC, another company that pivoted in to this that was a YC company, and then another company up here in Seattle as well. They've started building AI native engineering management tools as well, and there are themes there. Reviewing code so you can understand what's going on with an LLM, or understand relative complexity with an LLM. That's themes that we see through all of these companies. But how we're differentiated is we've spent a lot of time building a sophisticated pipeline that in code review deeply understands what's being built and displays it in the way that can be used. So we're now, we're in the process of rolling out our task-based UX. And there's a number of tasks that we're releasing, or UX for tasks that we're releasing over the coming weeks and months. One of the ones that we just released this week was the one-on-one. So you want to have a one-on-one with your developer. We now have a dedicated screen. You click on the button, you see the summary of what they've done over a given period of time in a way that's really helpful to have a conversation. And we think of all of the tasks that an engineering manager does in the team, whether it be executive summaries or weekly meetings or stand-ups or one-on-ones or writing promotion documents specifically, and how we can facilitate those. Promotion docs is coming very soon, and we're excited about that because a lot of companies, over 50 developers, spend a long time when they're writing a promotion doc for a developer, just gathering together the data that they need. So making sure that you don't have that recency bias by actually understanding all the project work that a developer has done over a period of time takes a long time. But we can actually do that in 30 seconds. We bring in all the data from code. We also ingest all the data from your issue management system, for instance, Jira, and we can bring that together in a consolidated report that can be a great starting point. The reason we say that we're Cursor for engineering managers is we definitely think of ourselves as the first draft for a ton of different tasks. Just like a developer asks for a component and they get the suggestion for a component, they can accept that or they can keep editing. We think the same way. We're getting better and better at providing these starting points, and in some cases it's perfect. Just kind of copy and paste, what we've put there for that particular task into the email or into the agenda or into the report. In other cases, you want to alter that slightly, but we're getting better and better at that, and focusing in on those tasks for an engineering manager, we think is really important because we think that's where the most leverage is for the organization to build high-performing teams.
Cool. Well, that's a lot. I mean, that sounds hugely powerful. I know you already touched on this a bit in some of the things you already said, but could you walk us through a typical use case if there is such a thing, or kind of maybe what it looks like in action if someone is using this in anger, sort of a thing?
Yeah. So, what you'll find in onboarding is we've my co-founder Ethan, he actually was building AI pipelines at Google before he quit to join the company. So he's built an incredibly scalable AI pipeline, and what that means is when you onboard, you can onboard your 20 repositories or 50 repositories in 10 minutes and get data very quickly. And the first thing that a leader will see across the organization is a summary of work for all of their different teams for any given period of time. They'll also be able to see, relative velocity of teams and individuals across the entire organization in the dashboard. And that's really powerful for the first time, them seeing that objectively across the whole organization. And what they will then do is share out access to their engineering managers. So when an engineering manager gets access, they dive into their team report. So typically, we're targeting, having engineering managers use this 4 times a day and being the single pane of glass that they go to, so they don't need to have to kind of dive in and analyze data from GitHub or from Jira. which were really built for other personas. Jira was built for product managers. GitHub was built for engineers, and engineering managers have previously been engineers, so they know how to use GitHub, but we can bring that to get data together in a much more useful way. So what you'll see is, our customers have told us that they use it every day before stand up to understand what the team has done yesterday. And that's a really typical ones. They open it up, see what everyone's built, and they go in and they can have a really tight meeting. So for an engineering manager, one of the challenges is this kind of going around the room in your startup and having developers disengaged and doing other things, and really just sapping the time for that whole team, and stand up going much longer than it needs to, because you're going around the room. So what the tool does is it means that prior to that meeting, you can see what everyone's built, and then you can have questions ready, and you can do a very quick round the room and ask the important questions and get out of there. That gives everyone time back, but it also means you've covered all the important points and you're all in alignment. So that also operates for a weekly meeting. When you want to understand what everyone's done last week. It also operates when you're going to a scrum of scrums and you need to understand what your team has done for the wider context. And that means other people can see that, but you can also use that as a starting point and then build out, and then kind of raise that up and explain, as an engineering manager, where your team's contributing, where they're struggling, where they're blocked, where they need help. So lots of use cases for an engineering manager. Ultimately, our goal is to help teams build high-performing teams. There's a couple of ways that we do that. So, for an engineering leader, they can now identify their hidden top performers, the people who are the unsung heroes. Software developers are the worst at their own PR, and so you often miss these within your organization. One of our customers told us that the second day they had our tool, they promoted one of their developers because, wow, he's really executing very fast, and they didn't realize how well he was doing. But with the tool, they were able to bring all the evidence together and make the case to their CEO and get his promotion. That's in a team of about 70. So great outcome from them, because now they've got better retention on their top developer. But that's something you can do instantly with the tool, is understand your unsung heroes across the organization. And as you go forward and you embed this into your processes, you can halve your management overhead, because a lot of the time that engineering managers spend on administration is really just summarization. It's really just taking all the tasks, all the work that's been done at a code level, and raising that up and explaining that to different audiences for different periods of time. So the ongoing operational use of the tool is really, how can you optimize your software development management process, and how can you give time back to engineering managers so they can actually spend more time one-on-one with developers, up-leveling them, and creating more 10x developers. So that's some of the ways that it's used. The one-on-one view we just launched is really about giving the engineering manager what they need to go in and have a meaningful conversation with a specific engineer, to help them with all of their issues, and once again become a 10x developer.
Yeah. That's really cool. That's powerful. I mean, it reminds me back in the days when I was an engineering manager at Quest. We had a guy, and you're right, the worst self-promoter in the world, but probably the best developer I've ever seen. So he would do his work, and then whenever he had to, do something and it touched somebody else's work, he would go fix all theirs too.
Right.
But you never knew that. You never knew that he was fixing all of their user stories while he was doing his own as well. Because back then, unless you actually went and looked at every single thing, you wouldn't know. You did kind of touch on this too, but any success stories that might be useful pointing out of some of your current, clients using this, some of the impact that it's had, so far that
Lots of success stories. Our biggest customer, we just signed a larger one, but one of our largest customers, they've got 130 developers. They brought us on for their open source project first. They have a very large open source project, and so they could bring us on. They could jump onto our SaaS without thinking about security or contracting or anything like this, because it's already open source. But they needed to understand what was going on with their open source project. So they jumped in, they analyzed the project, they got really excited. They used that for 2 months, and then they signed the contract with us, so they could kind of import all of their private repositories. But the big deal for them there is they've got a big team, 130 developers. That means that even if you have brilliant engineering managers, they probably don't think about progress and productivity in the same way. And so being able to lead that organization and understand how to build high-performing teams within that organization and keep everyone in alignment is a big task. And they just saw that immediately. They were able to change the way they managed teams, change the meetings they had, bring data instead of just opinions. And that was really powerful for them in aligning all of their leaders and building faster.
That's cool. So last one for me. So somebody listening to this might be saying, "Oh, well, we're a special little angel unicorn. We use this, piece of this safe framework, or we use this agile framework, or all the alphabet soup that's yet to be developed yet." Does that matter at all with using actual AI, or is that it's kind of separate?
Absolutely not. We've taken an approach. Um, you can think of it like you have a developer whose job it is to go and review all the code and talk about the code, and then talk about the code in all the ways that it could be talked about, except they can do that instantly to everyone in any context. And what that means is that we're not reliant on the information you put into a pull request, or the way that you are merging, or the issue management system you're using. Our source of truth primarily is the code, and then we enrich that data with things like issues from the issue management system. But what that means is that because we're really kind of our foundation is commits. That means whichever way you're doing software development, the tool is going to give you what you need. It's very adaptable to a lot of different situations. We're opinionated in a couple of ways about how we display data to make it really easy for the engineering manager. And generally, using our task-based UX, they'll start to use kind of new patterns that are faster. But it really doesn't have any implication in terms of the frameworks you're using or the other software that you're using.
Well, thanks, John, for that. That was a hugely powerful tool, I think, of what you're developing. Everybody who's listening, actual.ai, go check them out. And thank you again, everybody, for listening to another one of our podcasts. Thanks, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.
Thanks.